narrow, so we have to deal with it.
Is this bias or?
It is biased, yeah. Unless I grab my own binding and use it. Because this is a little bit too narrow. Okay, let's get that started. Yeah, so we have two options, as I said. We're either going to see all the stitches from outside or we don't see the stitches from outside. So if we take this as an inside layer of the corset, and this would be the outside layer, so you could plan ahead of time and see if you want to have those stitches as a decorating stitches outside so you can see it, or if you don't want to see it and you just want to have the structure for the corset, so you're just gonna put it on the inside layer only and you cover it with the other one outside so you don't see it.
If we have a transparent fabric, what we have to do for that?
With transparent fabric and you want to have corseted transparent, so you still have to interface it. With the transparent corset that you see through at the end too,
This part, yes.
well, you're going to see the boning
Oh.
regardless. Your boning is going to be your feature on the garment. So you have to plan on that you see the lines, you're going to see the boning, you're going to see the stitches. So in that case, yeah, that's part of your design, part of your garment feature. Okay. But right now, we are basing it on the heavier fabric that doesn't have that option. So it's all solid, and
You don't use lining under.
you could use lining under if your outside is stiff enough and you feel that you don't need another stiff fabric inside. You could use lining inside to finish it. But for that part of the corset that basically you could double your fabric or use the self fabric inside and outside. But on one side you could use interfacing, the other side not to use the interfacing. It depends of how stiff you want it to be and how fabric it is. So let's just put that aside. In here, if you have to plan ahead of time, and I'm going to do half of it with non-seeing, non-visible boning, and the other half with the visible stitches.
Can you make it the same as you?
You could do the same thing because I do have two samples here that one is without stitching outside, the other one is with. So I just want to combine those two together, basically. So I'm going to use maybe these three in the middle as a non-visible one and the other two outside as a visible one. Is that good enough? Okay. So for that reason, if I want it to be kind of not visible, I need the Ridgeline for that. Yeah. I could, that's why I'm just going to combine the Ridgeline and the other boning as well. So you will see what the difference is going to be. And in most cases, you do need, I'm going to cut the boning first because that length has to be very precise now. And one other thing that you need to do with this, because as I said, these ends are going to start poking through. Eventually they're going to start poking through. So it needs to be wrapped with something, at least to stop it for a while before you get to that point. I'm just going to grab a piece of fabric that I have, and I'm going to wrap the end of the boning with, just to make sure that it's not poking through right away. Eventually it's going to poke through, but that is not poking through right away. So I'm just going to stitch this down. And I will do the same thing to the bottom edge. So this, at least it stops it for a while until it cut through those and comes out eventually. And then I'm going to place it in here, place it in the center, so keep it away from the seam allowances. For sure, if you're planning to finish this from inside, so the boning cannot go into the seam at all, because you have to have a room to sew it and flip it. So you don't want to flip it with the boning. But even if you have to put the binding, it could go a little bit farther with the binding. You can sew the binding through it, but not with the self-finishing from inside. So with this, you're gonna just sew the double line.
What inch down you put it? How much between each part?
It depends how much seam you have. For this, because I'm gonna put the binding, so I kept that at 1/4 inch. But if I have to have the seam allowance folded in and finish or bag it out from inside, so I'm gonna lower it even more, because I want to have a little bit more room. So at least if I have a 1/4 inch seam here, I'm going to lower it for 3/8 of an inch on either end. So that's how the ridgeline gets sewn in on both sides of the ridgeline. You stitch it down, so you will see the stitch through the fabric, but that's the inside layer of the garment. The outside layer, you won't see it still. And the other ones, even that would be one sample enough. I do the rest of them with the other boning if I have enough. Do I have enough for two groups? For the other ones, I need to finish my pieces first before I create my channels for my boning. So as I said, if you're planning to finish the top edge or bottom edge with self-finish inside, so you just need to do it now and flip it. Since we are doing the binding, I'm just gonna put together with the flat and raw edges. I base it together. I can just even sew them together on one edge. Because I do have a 1/4 inch seam, I'm going to use a small 1/4 inch to tack it together. For corset, if you decide to do a finished edge at the top, just do the binding at the bottom, unless you're planning to do some hand stitching. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to put the boning in and start flipping the garment. So one edge, at least you give that one edge to yourself for binding finishing. The other edge, if you want to finish it, if it's at the top, you want to finish it with the self-finishing from inside, you could do that. But then after it's flipped, leave the bottom for either it's going to be a hand stitching finish or mostly it's going to be a binding finishing. And the other ends, of course, is going to get the closures. So it's going to be like a hook and well, we're going to be using the hook and eye at this point just to practice the hook and eye. I'm just going to draw my lines again for, of course, you're going to be using something that it doesn't leave a mark. For the other one, you need 2 lines of stitches. Again, even, let me just do it in a different way as well. For this side, you could double stitch here and create a channel between the 2 layers that you have. But again, if you're planning to use this boning and not to see the stitch from outside, then you need to create a casing into the inside layer. So that means I can just use piece of fabric. Let me just show you that. From inside the garment, before you start stitching, I put this over this fabric, 1/4 inch on either side of your center line. So you create like a, because your boning is 1/4 inch, so you want to have like 3/8 of an inch spacing. Of course, you're going to do that before you start stitching the top close. So this way, you created the casing using that plastic boning, still not showing through the outside. So you see, there are all different options, all different ways of finishing this the way you want it. So that way, this is going to get going into that. Again, you have to. So goes in here, boning sits inside, and then you don't see it from outside again. I'm going to insert that boning later. So the advantage, as I said, the advantage of using this is that you finish your corset, you just leave the bottom edge open, and you insert your boning in after the fact. You don't have to struggle through working with the boning already attached. For the rest of them, I'm just gonna sew through. And make sure you don't make your channels too big. Just go based on the boning that you have. Sometimes you're using 1/4 inch, sometimes you're using wider one. So based on this, you want to be giving it a 1/8 of an inch space for the boning on the side to move in. You don't want to make it too big. If you make it too big, sometimes the boning will start flipping inside. If there is too much room, the bonings will start moving too much and flipping. You don't want that to happen. So in this case here, you can see that I have my channels outside. I created the channel between the two layers I have. I would imagine most of the time this is what you're going to go for if you don't want to see your stitches outside. So that's what you're going to go for. You're either going to go with the Ridgeline, sew it in, or you're going to create your channel inside using a tape. So you don't see anything outside. For that, I'm just going to create another channel here. Also through. And I'm going to start inserting my boning in. Again, it depends what kind of closure you have for this. If you have a zippers, you have hook and eye, or if you have busk, you probably have to plan ahead of time. See which one you're going to do first. Are you going to do your closure first and then you're going to finish the bottom, which is mostly the case. So if that's the case, you're going to be finishing your closure. In our case, here is hook and eye tape, which I like to get my hook and eye tape somewhere. Is there? I guess it's just right that one there. Yeah, good. That's it. Thank you. And so you're going to finish your hook and eye tape because you want to be able to finish also the end of the hook and eye tape inside the binding. So binding is going to be the very last thing to do to finish the whole thing. But your hook and eye is going to get folded and you're basically sandwiching the edge in there and top stitching it. Again, if you decide to use the hook and eye like this, we still have to use the boning in here. So you have to make sure you leave enough space for the boning to go beside the hook and eye. You need to still to have the boning to support our hook and eye. And the other one is going to
Inside or not?
in between between the tape of the hook and eye and the fabric, because we are sandwiching this. And the other thing is that sometimes you want to have some kind of shield under the hook and eye, because that happens when you use the hook and eye, so that you get a little bit of separation here, so you see the skin underneath. If sometimes you don't want to see that, so you want to have the shield underneath it. So there's all those possibilities that you need to think about when you start doing this. So are we going to be using the tape itself as a shield, or are we going to be finishing the shield, the facing of that, the tape, like the binding, and then we use that as a shield underneath. So there is an option how you're going to be applying your tape, because if you're applying your tape like this, both our ends closed. If you're applying the tape right on top, like this, you could use this part of the tape as a shield underneath. Unless you're planning to add your own shield to it, so you can just fold this under and use this as a binding to finish the edge. If you use it flat like this, so that means this edge still has to be finished underneath. I'm just going to wrap this around it to make this finished, so you don't have the raw edges exposed. So I'm just going to edge stitch it through. I'm going to move my eyelet up, so that gives me enough space, because I have a binding in here. I don't want binding to go over the loop here. So in that case, I either have to move it up completely, or move it in a way that get it out of the way when I sew. I don't want to sew through the loop. So that gets folded. Make sure the edge underneath, you catch it at the same time from the top. Again, this is going to go, and this is going to be based on the binding that I have is only a 1/4 inch, so that top is going to end up with the boning at the top. The loop at the top of the corset, but it's going to be right below the binding. So I just have to line it up with the other side to make sure they're even. Wherever that ends, this part has to end too. I'm just going to lower this if you think that is not enough, so just get rid of the other one on top. And the hook stays underneath. So you wrap it in a way that the hook stays underneath, and you're going to hook it from the top this way. I just want to make sure that my hooks and loops, they are matching and they're lining up together. Again, if your foot is too wide for this, you may have to switch to a zipper foot or narrower foot. It looks like that foot is a little bit too wide, so I just have to switch to a different foot to do this. Make sure that they catch it underneath fully. Otherwise, the foot keeps pushing it out, and I don't catch the bottom. Still, I'm using the wrong zipper foot. it catches. It does catch, but I'm using the wrong zipper foot. I have to use the other side. Make sure that doesn't push. Did any of you get that narrow foot at all? Sometimes it comes very handy.
The store is selling?
Yeah, a store has it.
Oh,
So that should come on like this and gets hooked. And of course, as you see, there is a little bit of gap when they hook it up. There's a little bit of gap. So if that gap is bothering anybody, because obviously it's a corset. You have lacing. If you have lacing, there is a gap in the lacing, unless you want to put the shield underneath. So there's seeing a little bit of a skin that way is not a big deal. But if sometimes it's just a matter of the comfort. So you don't want this hook to go against the skin. So in that case, you may want to put the shield underneath just to protect the skin going against the roughness of these hooks. So that same thing basically sometimes happen with the lacing. You don't want that lacing gets kind of touching the skin. So you could just put the shield underneath it. Let me know when the time is for.
10:45.
It's 10:45 right now? Okay.
Yes.
We still have time. Don't want to cut through that hook. We have to remove the hooks. Okay. So at the end, if you end up with a little bit of a space at the bottom that your hook is not covering, after your finishing is done, after your binding is on, you may have to add your own hook to it. You can separate one of the hooks here and sew it manually on. So to make sure that you have one at the bottom. Because right now, even if there is a hook in here, it's going to go inside the binding. And we don't want that to happen. So after the binding is in, we can just add our hook to it after. Unless that's secure enough. So again, because it's soft, for corset you want it to be rigid and you want it to be kind of structured, this should give you the opportunity to put the boning in. On either side of the hooks, so it gives a little bit more, so it doesn't collapse on the body. When you wear it, if it's tight, so there is a chance that it's always collapsing. So if you put the boning right beside it, so that it stops it from collapsing. So now is the binding time for this to finish it. So our binding is a narrow one. It's quite narrow. So unless, is this a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch? It's still like a 1/2 inch binding, but this is not going to give us 1/2 inch binding unless we leave the bottom flat, not to fold it. So let me see how that works if you have to do this, because sometimes you could but at the bottom part, I'm just going to finish it with a double fold. At the top, I'm going to try to finish it with flat under. Fold on top and flat under. So still I have to go with the smaller binding, because this is very narrow. It's not even 9 inch. It's very shy 1 inch. So it should give you a 1/4 inch binding, but I don't think it's going to. It's still gonna do a 1/4 inch. I sew it in. So that's the right side up when I start sewing. This is the right side up. Start sewing it. So I go around. The fact that you have a bias binding, you should be able to curl it around the edges. Make sure you don't go over your hooks. Give a little bit of extra length to the end on both ends. Then you're just gonna wrap this around and wrap this under and leave it flat underneath. So, but before you wrap this around, you need to finish this end. So I'm gonna just fold the end under and tack it. And fold this end also under, backward, and tack it in. So this way, when you fold this up, this end is already folded finish. And the same thing would happen to here. And you're just gonna wrap this around it. You just have to tilt this in so it doesn't stick out from the corner. Wrap this around. If you wanna press it ahead of time, you could. And you're either gonna stitch in the ditch or you're gonna edge stitch the binding. I'm gonna stitch in the ditch in here just to make it a little bit more difficult. As I said, you have an option of taking it to the iron and press it, but it's not necessary. And again, you want to tilt the end in a little bit so it doesn't stick out from the corner. So that should give you the finished edge on the top. The bottom also is going to get finished the same way, but before I start finishing the bottom, I'm just going to insert the boning in. So we have at least these 3 that I created casing for, plus the 1 that I created casing inside. So they all need to be having boning inside before we start finishing. So that goes in. You want to measure and shorten it by 1/2 inch. So that gives you 1/4 inch from either end. Again, make sure you're rounding up the corners so you don't have any sharp corner. Put it in. Then you can just that one here is the invisible one. I'm just going to measure to see how much I need to cut it. And so on and so on. Again, this it out. So that's in, and then you're ready to start sewing your binding in. You could do the same thing with the binding. As I said, because it's narrow, I don't even attempt to fold it twice underneath. I'm just going to do the same thing I did to the top based on the tape I have. If you have a wider tape, I would have pressed it ahead of time and do it that way. But since I don't have wide enough tape, I'm just going to do a small 1/4 of an inch and then flat underneath. So this way. Again, you need a little bit of extra on both ends to be able to fold it under. Fold it under before you start flipping your binding. Tack it. Same thing on the other side. And then flip it. Wrap it around and stitch in the ditch. Again, you can just take it and press it if you want. I'd rather not to because I can manipulate it the way it is. And the tape and the end of the tape needs to be tucked in. So that's basically it. So again, boning goes into the end of where the, oh, I already closed it. Did I mention? I mentioned it already. But before we do this, we need to put boning right beside the hook and eye as well. Okay. Well, this should give you the finishing. So from inside, you will see all the bonings, all 5 of them, plus the 2 is going to be inside the tape. But from outside, you only see 3, the one that we created the channel through both layers. The other ones, they are stitched only into the facing part of the garment.